Hello and welcome to another episode of Disappeared the Abyss. Here with you as Alina and hello Jacob. How are you?
Hi Alina, I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing well. Tonight we're discussing the fourth episode of Disappeared of the first season. This episode is called The Last Truck Stop. And it all surrounds the case of Michelle Whitaker, who disappeared on August 5th, 2002 at age 32. After Michelle had been drinking a lot over the course of a weekend, she was last seen in South Carolina at a truck stop, thus the name. Sergeant Alan Wood described that she had a lot of acquaintances and sometimes she spent the night at their places. Her mother, Laura Andrews, received a call from a man that Michelle had been staying with, who expressed concern because he was unable to reach or find her. Laura, at this point, hadn't spoken to her daughter in 3 days, and Michelle didn't live at her mom's place anymore, but she was still in and out of the house, and Laura recalls that she always knew where her daughter was at. So Michelle's parents believe that in the weeks prior to her disappearance, Michelle was dangerously out of control. Michelle had gotten picked up by police after having too much to drink a couple of times in the past, and in late July 2002, so only a few days or a week before she disappeared, she was picked up by the police again for being intoxicated in the public. And so her parents decided that they wanted her to remain in jail until they came to pick her up. This made Michelle upset. But due to a mix-up, Michelle was released from jail regardless before her parents could even come and pick her up. Michelle spent her childhood in Illinois before she moved with her family to South Carolina. She got married very, very young, right out of high school, actually. And according to her mom, Michelle was too young to deal with her husband, who treated her badly. Michelle's sister believes that she was headed in the wrong direction because she was drinking a lot and hung out with the wrong crowd. Lauren asked Sergeant Woods to help Michelle. Sergeant Woods lived in their neighborhood really close by, and he got her a job at a doctor's office. But Michelle was fired due to issues like theft, he recalls. By 30, Michelle had been divorced 3 times, so at this point in her life, she had trouble with substance abuse, theft, and had 3 failed marriages.
Michelle clearly had a lot on her plate, and this kind of contributed to some of the situations that she found herself in. According to Master Deputy Tom Smith, it appears that Michelle was bar hopping after she was released from jail mistakenly on that drunken disorderly charge, and then she was last seen, as we mentioned, at the truck stop. But on the day before she disappeared, Michelle had met a man. He works as a pipe fitter, and his name is Brad Wines, and they met at a bar. Michelle told him that her boyfriend had kicked her out and that she was afraid of him. Brad says that Michelle seemed a little uneasy and was kind of looking over her shoulder and checking the door, perhaps afraid that this boyfriend might be coming for her. Now, Wines was the last person who Michelle was seen with, and according to Sergeant Woods, that makes him a suspect. As we know, the last person to see someone can be suspicious. Now, according to Brad Wines, Michelle told him that she had plans to go to Myrtle Beach to work there. Myrtle Beach being a kind of tourism spot. There's lots of bars and restaurants, and perhaps Michelle could easily pick up a place to work there and get some cash. Now, he explains that Michelle spent the night at his place there, and then he gave her some clothes, and she'd asked him to take her to the truck stop, and so he did. That next morning, he gave her a few bucks to get on her way, and that was the last time that he saw her. Now, Brad Wines would also take a polygraph test that police administered to him after being the last person to see her, and that always makes you a suspect. So, Alina, at this point, do you think it's likely that Michelle would have wanted to actually have been dropped off at a truck stop at night? I mean, we know that that's not ended up what happening, but how likely of a story is that this young woman would ask to go to a truck stop at night so that she can go to Myrtle Beach?
I think that's a difficult question, just because if I try to put myself in her shoes, I wouldn't want that. But then there is a lot we know about her and her lifestyle so far that makes me think, like, yeah, maybe that was the kind of person she was. She may have had this attitude of nothing bad can happen to me, and she seemed to be out and about a lot, drinking, hanging out with all kinds of people. And so I kind of could have seen that with her actually making that request. But I mean, still, he was the last person to have seen her, so it does make sense that Sergeant Woods would say, yeah, he was the last person to see her, so he is a suspect. Just seeing this guy, though, I mean, this is obviously not facts, but just I didn't get like bad vibes for him or anything like that. How do you feel?
Well, you have to factor in just the fact that in this episode, he appears on camera, and that's already something that is, you don't always see. Sometimes you have suspects that decline to be interviewed for whatever reason, and Brad is not one of them. He is interviewed on the show, and I get the same kind of feeling. It seems like he's probably telling the truth. There's nothing that immediately comes off as suspicious. And he did take that polygraph test, and they never say exactly what the polygraph test found, at least not in the episode, but they do say that they didn't really have reason to doubt his story after that polygraph test. They still were interested in him, just naturally being supposedly the last person to see Michelle, but they don't have much to go on because so far his story seems to be checking out.
I just wonder, because they don't really mention this, but I wonder if they have any video footage or if they have people corroborating his story, because, yeah, they seem to believe him, or maybe that is due to the polygraph test, or he was just very cooperative. But yeah, I just really wonder if there is more, or if she's been seen at the truck stop this morning by anybody else than him. But I guess we don't know.
Exactly. Because you also have to imagine that if his story is true and she was dropped off at a truck stop in the morning, it's going to be daylight. There's going to be more people there than had it been at night. If he was trying to create some sort of story where she could have disappeared at the hands of someone else, I would think you would say, I dropped her off that night in the dark, and no one, the odds of someone being there, seeing it, being captured on video are much lower. So it kind of lends some credibility to his story that makes more sense for him to have dropped her off in the morning.
Well, when I watched the episode, I was kind of wondering, like, he did her a lot of favors. Like, maybe he's just this super nice guy, but also it came to my mind, like, well, did he want anything in return for being so nice to her? And I mean, we talked about all the things now that make us think he's probably not involved in her disappearance, but we do not know. Like, she was at his place the night before. At least he admits that, and he's done a lot of things for her, according to him. So I could always see that creating a situation where he'd maybe want just something nice of her, maybe something sexual in return. I mean, at least I wouldn't want to put myself in that situation, to be with a stranger and he's being so generous to me. I'd always be like, ugh, hopefully he doesn't think now I owe anything to him in return.
Right.
I don't know.
And
just
it's
something that
possible that he made some sort of advance on her, like you said, after providing her with, a place to sleep, some clothing, and he says even some cash. It's certainly possible to think that maybe he was doing these things with a different intent. And they did meet at a bar, and who knows what they were both looking for or feeling that night. And maybe he was under a different impression than she was, and things did not work
Who
out. But
knows?
there's a lot of possibilities and not a lot of corroborating evidence that we're aware of. We just kind of have his story to go on, and that's all we have.
I
Now,
was wondering about the boyfriend too that he mentions that uh, apparently she has mentioned, because I don't think her mother or her sister bring him up, and we don't get much more information on him. So if she was actually scared of him, then I think he could be a good suspect too. But they don't really talk about the boyfriend. Or I wonder if that was her way of just getting all those favors from men that may feel sorry for her. I could kind of see that too. Who knows? But I was just curious because they just don't get into it.
yeah, I don't know if you have any more insight into this either, but I was thinking about Michelle's mother says that she got a call from someone that Michelle was living
Mm-hmm.
with that she hadn't shown up. And I couldn't really tell whether that was the boyfriend, if she had been living with the boyfriend at this time, because if it is, that would kind of lend some credibility to him for at least reporting her missing and trying to get the ball rolling on where she might be by calling her mom. But I don't know the answer to that.
No, I don't know that either.
Do you think there are any other reasons that she might have gone missing at this point? I know, her mom thinks this was rock bottom and she was kind of in just a desperate mode at this time, maybe not making the best decisions.
I was wondering about the possibility of suicide as well, because knowing she was drinking a lot of alcohol, we do learn about some other traumatic events in her past later on. She just had like a really bad relationship with her mom at that point, knowing that she wanted to leave her at jail, and she was really upset about that too. With all her life choices up until this point, it just seems like an option to me too that she wasn't happy with her life and was wanting to end it. Though I would assume that they would find her at some point if that is what happened.
So naturally, police also have all of these
Mm-hmm.
questions and continue their investigation. Police will search for Michelle. Myrtle Beach police will search for her after hearing the story that she was possibly looking to go work there, but they aren't able to find any trace of her. So after Michelle had been missing for a couple weeks, her family, their anxiety really starts to grow. Her sister says that it was possible that Michelle just didn't talk to her mom for a few weeks, but she would always stay in touch with her, so something wasn't adding up here. Police explain that when people leave on their own volition, they also usually take some clothes and a toothbrush, some of the essential things that you would need if you're leaving. But as far as we know, Michelle took nothing with her really other than what she had after the bar that night. And also, no one could believe that she would leave her beloved dog behind. She had a dog that she apparently left in her apartment and never took with her. So this is starting to raise some alarm bells, certainly.
Yes, and with those alarm bells ringing, this to me is like a clear indication that you'd go in the direction like either a crime happened or maybe she committed suicide, especially the dog. People are so attached to their dog, and even if you leave everything else behind, would you really leave your dog and not even telling a relative to look after it? I think that's what her sister brought up too, that you'd usually let someone know to look after the dog. Um,
Yeah, to me, that's one of the biggest indicators that something is probably wrong here. If you're planning, even if you're planning to run away or do something, you probably need clothes, maybe some cash, your animal, or at least a plan for them.
mhm.
It seems like she is gone without really any planning.
And then I think the only thing she does have, or that we know about, is that what Wines talks about, that he gave her some of his clothes and a few bucks, but that's not much if you're really planning to go away for a long time. Lauren explains that she may have been too tough on Michelle and that she probably would have done it all a little differently if she had the chance to change it, but she still believes that it was necessary at the time. So, what I got from Lauren at that point was that she was kind of in between. Like, I think she still understood why she did what she did, but she kind of wishes she could have done something differently because she didn't like the outcome. She didn't want her daughter to go missing, and it sounds like maybe she thinks if she had done things a little differently, maybe that wouldn't have happened. I don't know. Lauren wonders if a brutal rape, that is kind of what we alluded to earlier, that happened in the 90s to Michelle may also have something to do with her disappearance. So in this attack, Michelle's face was broken, and Lauren recalls that Michelle, well, this is how Lauren phrased it in the episode. Well, she phrased it the way that Michelle has put herself in harm's way, and that she was in an unsafe situation that she got herself into. Lauren believes that Michelle may not have found that her mother's response was supportive, and she is sorry for that. After the rape, Michelle felt worthless and that no one loved her or cared about her, according to her mom. And to me, it was just hard to hear in the episode the way Michelle's mom phrased it. It still sounded a lot like victim blaming to me. And if that was the way she talked about the whole thing to her daughter back when it happened, I could see that really hurting. You were already a victim, and yeah, just feeling like nobody's there for you, or especially your mom, and kind of putting the blame on you. I could see that putting a strain on the relationship for sure. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I agree, definitely. We're starting to see there were many cracks in their relationship, and the way that her mom handled some of the issues in Michelle's life. You can see her mom recognizing that maybe she didn't do the best job, or maybe she would change some of the way that she handled things. And I think that's natural too. After someone disappears, you probably can't help but wonder, especially when it's your daughter, if you had something to do with that or contributed to in any way the choices that they were making in their life that led to their disappearance. And you can definitely see while watching the episode the kind of anguish that Michelle's mom is going through here, reevaluating kind of how she handled all of her conversations with her daughter and all of the trouble that her daughter found herself in.
Yeah, I agree that you'd easily go back and question just anything you've done or any interaction you've had. At this point, police periodically check Michelle's rep sheet and to see if she's been picked up for something somewhere, but nothing ever comes up. And after 1 year has passed, her family and police start to believe that maybe someone had harmed her. So I thought that was a really bad sign, knowing she's been arrested in the past regularly. She does run into trouble. And so it does seem like a really bad sign that they found nothing on her after a whole year has passed. And at the same time, I was really like a little bit surprised because they were looking for her before, but it kind of sounds in the episode like just now they're starting to get like really worried. Was that how you felt as well, or?
Yeah, I kind of see their thinking a little bit. I suppose if you're kind of one of these people who hangs around bad circles and maybe you're not always living your life completely on the grid, but you pop up now and then kind of thing. Like her sister said, it was normal for her not to check in with her mom for a few weeks or whatnot. But I think the longer time goes on, it was just more and more alarming to people in Michelle's circle that they weren't getting that check-in. They weren't hearing from her. And I think after a while, police kind of had the same impression of like, okay, well, maybe we expected her to just resurface somewhere, but this isn't happening. And now we need to take this more seriously.
This episode is also the episode of some very creepy dolls. We get a lot of shots on creepy dolls. I remember when I rewatched this episode that I was like, oh, it's this episode. It's the dolls. Don't
It's the
follow
doll
me to my
episode.
sleep,
Yes.
please.
We would be remiss if we didn't talk about the dolls. I mean, this stood out to me right away when that clip came up and they focus on them very closely. And I couldn't help but wonder, is this just some random B-roll that they needed, or was this like her childhood bedroom? Were these her dolls? There's some very eerie shots of the dolls throughout the episode,
Very
which
eerie.
definitely gives you a bad feeling. If that was their intent, well, it was mission accomplished then. On the third anniversary of Michelle's disappearance, her mother and police will visit the truck stop again that they believe she was last seen at. This is kind of to get some buzz generated again. They bring out the media, they're distributing flyers again, just really trying to drum up some leads. And days after the media reports about this event, a letter arrives at the local police department. It was a handwritten letter. It was anonymous, so no signature, and it describes where Michelle's body can be found, and it even contains like a detailed handwritten map of the location. Alina, when you learned about this, what did you think? If my alarm bell started going off when I heard about this, because it just seems very timely right after this piece kind of comes out, and someone decides to write in with exactly what investigators have been hoping to get.
My first thought was just that this happens in so many cases that they get letters and they usually turn out to be fake. So that was my first thought on this. Did you
Yeah, I
think
wondered, like,
they were more credible? Were you hoping they were gonna find anything, or?
I was encouraged. I mean, like, it's basically exactly what an investigator or police would hope to get. You know, obviously, at this point, they are kind of getting bad feelings about Michelle,
Mm-hmm.
having not seen her. And, you know, your mind logically goes to maybe something bad did happen to her. And maybe her, at this point, maybe we're looking for a body. And so when you get a letter like that, that purports to have such an exact location and even a map to take you there, it seems a little too good to be true, but, you know, they have nothing better to go on. So at this point, I understand why they want to check it out. But I also think whoever wrote this letter is suspicious, obviously, because one, why do they know where this body is? And two, why did they sit on this information for as long as they did and wait till they, you know, saw Michelle's name in the media again before coming forth with the information? So the next day, after receiving this letter, police check out the lead. They send cadaver dogs to the area to examine the ground and try to pick up a scent, but the dogs never find anything, and the search ultimately comes up empty. Now, the author of the letter is never identified, but they are able to do some analysis on this, some handwriting analysis and some DNA that was on the letter. They believe it was a woman, but they are never able to figure out who it was. And police aren't super suspicious. They think this may have just been someone that was trying to help out with the case in whatever way. Maybe they thought they had the answers. Maybe they thought they had some sort of psychic powers, or, you know, it wasn't necessarily a malicious thing trying to mislead law enforcement or waste their time, but perhaps someone who did not really have the information that they thought they
Yeah,
did.
and I think this does actually like happen more regularly. I can recall this from other cases where they have psychics like write in and they really just want to help, but it may just end up not being the right location or something. But they do, yeah, they did still check it out. So I think it makes sense, even if it's unlikely. You want to, at this point, follow any lead that you do get.
Absolutely. And another lead that police start working on is a brutal murder case that is, we find out, tied to Michelle in a way. Dana Satterfield's case was that murder case. A man named Jonathan Vick killed Dana, but he was also questioned in the disappearance of another woman named Heather Sellers, who was his fiancée at the time. But the tie-in is that Heather Sellers disappeared shortly after Michelle went missing, and her body was never found. And not only did they go missing around the same time, but Heather and Michelle actually worked at the same restaurant, this Waffle House. So now eyes are really starting to be focused on this Jonathan Vick. They already know he has the capability to kill. He's done it before. And now his fiance is missing, and his fiance knows Michelle. So police start investigating. A woman also claimed that she had seen Michelle and Jonathan on a date that started at that Waffle House. Another witness claimed that Michelle may have entered a room to Vic's rented a room, that is, to Vic's stepfather, possibly just for one night every other week. So they're starting to see these various connections, and it is eerie. I can see, if you're an investigator, there's too many linkages here that could suggest maybe it's more than a coincidence. What do you think?
I mean, if you have a murderer like this in your close circles of friends or acquaintances, and someone you work with, that's their fiance, and she goes missing, I think, in September, and Michelle went missing in August. That seems too much of a coincidence. It just seems like it creeps me out. I would definitely look at him if I was police. Yeah, definitely investigate him very thoroughly. Um, it's it's just sad. Like, we know that Heather has never been found. Her body was never located. So yeah, just really creepy. Wonder what happened to her too. And one thing that, maybe you have more information on this, but I was just surprised when they mentioned that she probably rented out a room to his dad, but she was staying with like all sorts of different people, or sometimes at her home. I was like, wait, she has a place of herself and she can rent out a room? I was surprised by that, actually, from everything I'd read before, or heard before about her life. That did come as a surprise to me.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like she had a unstable housing situation. So when they said that she may have rented out a room, I'm not sure exactly what that means. That's kind of one of those things where I just wonder about the credibility
The
of some
source.
of these stories,
Yeah.
exactly, and these witness accounts. Are these really, the same people? Or are they, when they say they saw Michelle and Jonathan on a date, did they really see
Heather.
Jonathan and his
Yeah.
fiance,
Yeah.
and just get confused? Because that certainly would make a lot of sense to see them together. So unfortunately, if you're police, though, you kind of have to treat this at its face value in case it is true, and do the best investigation that you can to figure out the
And
truth.
we know that witnesses often do get things wrong. So it's not even that they mean to do any harm, or they mean have bad intentions, but it just actually their memory can be wrong in their head, but they can be 100% sure that's what they saw. And I think in people's heads, if they know about this murderer and know the close connectivity, they may just go back like, wait, didn't I see them together? Yeah, I could totally
Exactly.
see
And
that.
people want to be helpful
Hmm.
too, and they want to do something to help solve a mystery like this.
Vic was never charged in Heather's or Michelle's disappearances, and both cases did grow cold without any leads. After Michelle's parents moved, they do decide to keep their phone number that they've always had, hoping that Michelle one day will reach out to them. On the fifth year anniversary, friends and family gathered at a church to grieve. It was in a memorial service, but it did bring some form of closure to them. That's at least what Michelle's sister recalled. Sergeant Woods later has a conversation with Lauren about, well, basically, she asks him what he, at this point, things happened to Michelle, and he tells her that all signs point toward something bad happened to her, and that she's probably not alive anymore at this point, especially because she had this history of arrests, and then now nothing can be found. And her mom does agree that it does seem likely that she is not alive anymore. And at this point, with all the information we have, get why they come to this conclusion. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, I think that's about the right time. We're 5 years into the case, and as hard as it can be, if you haven't found someone after that amount of time, the odds of them coming back to you are just really, really small. I mean, they say that the first 24, 48 hours after a disappearance is already the critical period. So when you get to the 5-year mark, I think it would be hard to not assume that she is dead at this point. After 5 years and she's still missing, a detective and cold case investigator is assigned to the case. His name is William Gary. Michelle's case was being investigated as a homicide at that time. Then on August 4th of 2008, this cold case investigator gets a call from an Oregon woman that believes to know where Michelle is. And as you can imagine, if you're the cold case investigator, you're a little skeptical of this call so many years later that claims to know where this missing woman is. He doesn't think it can be true and thinks maybe it's a case of identity theft or this person is mistaken, whatever it might be. So he asked for a picture, and this woman emails a picture of what looks to be like Michelle. A dead ringer. They say maybe she had looked a little fuller, had put on a little weight, but it looks like originally they think maybe it's an old picture of Michelle because it's so accurate. So they send an Oregon State Police trooper to meet up with this woman and try to verify her identity. Now, on the very same day that Michelle disappeared, 6 years later, Sergeant Woods calls Michelle's mom, Lauren, and he tells her that, sure enough, her daughter was found and she's alive. And Lauren says that this was basically a dream, hard to process. She just answered the call. It was a quick call, and she just hung up the phone and then suddenly had so many questions about what she just heard. Where was Michelle? Why was she gone? How can she talk to her? But the unfortunate thing is police aren't able to tell Lauren where her daughter is. They had this agreement early on that if Michelle was gone of her own volition, that they can't tell her mother where she is or how to contact her, but they do encourage Michelle to reach out to her family. And this must have been really hard information, Alina, to hear. Some really good news.
Yeah.
These cases rarely end with the person still alive and out there and police are able to find them. But at the same time, now Lauren still isn't really able to see or talk to her daughter. So the next evening, though, after police highly encouraged Michelle to reach out to her family, she does call her mother. And 2 weeks later, at the Atlanta airport, they meet Michelle. And this is captured on video, this kind of homecoming moment. And there are lots of hugs and smiles as they are reunited after all of this time apart. And just a few weeks later, actually, Michelle's sister got married, and she got to be there and be a part of that whole celebration. And they're kind of just taking this moment in to celebrate because this is not something that I think any of them thought was going to be able to happen. And after they kind of take in this moment of joy and are reunited, then they obviously have some questions. Where you been all this time? Why didn't you reach out to us? What's going on? So Michelle explains that she'd gone to a lot of different places after she left that night or that morning, and she eventually fell in love with a man and ended up in Reno, Nevada, and then she moved to Oregon with him. And she explained that she was living and working on a farm as a nanny, taking care of a bunch of kids, and that she kind of just had found her zen, and she was really happy living that kind of life. And she says that she hadn't really thought too much about her family potentially doing all the searches that they were doing, police looking for her. It turns out she had just left. which is kind of a remarkable ending. I don't know about you, Alina, but I did not expect that.
I wouldn't have expected that from the information we were given throughout the episode. I did, however, halfway through the episode remember the outcome because I've seen it before, but just with everything we have, there is nothing that gives you hope that she'd be alive somewhere. Um, I, yeah, if I had just information to go off of that any viewer that watches this episode for the first time has, I wouldn't have seen this coming. I mean, she was last seen at a truck stop supposedly, but we don't know if anybody else, except for Vines, actually has seen her there. So it could also have just been him. It could have been the violent boyfriend. There's a murderer that she's apparently met before. Another girl went missing. So many directions this could have gone wrong.
Yeah, a
And
lot of reasons
yeah,
that her story could have gone bad.
I'm
That's
glad
for
we do
sure.
get this case and we do get to talk about this episode where we have a great outcome. This happens so rarely on the show, and it's just a joyous moment to take in. It's nice to see how they reunite at the airport, and yeah, that they get a second chance with each other, you know.
I agree totally. It did make me think a little bit, though, why they weren't able to find her sooner. As far as we know, she was living, a little off grid, probably on this farm, maybe getting some money under the table, but they say that she was still using her regular, normal name, and wasn't really, as far as we know, trying to hide. But it did make me wonder a little bit, if you're Michelle, do you know that your family was looking for you? Or was there even the thought in the back of your mind that, hey, I haven't talked to my mom or my sister or my grandparents or seen my dog or anything like that in 6 years. I wonder if they're thinking about me. And she kind of expresses some regret afterwards in her interview during the show, saying that she, wishes the resources of police wouldn't have been taken up by her when she obviously didn't really need them to go searching through the woods for a body or putting up posters or anything like that. But I wasn't fully clear on how much she really knew or didn't know about the search that her family was conducting for her.
Yeah, I agree that that was kind of yeah, left up in the open. And I wonder too, like if she had this falling out with her mom where Michelle recalls that her mom kind of told her like we'd be better off without you, and maybe she got so mad after the arrest too, and she was just like, well, now you're gonna see how you're gonna be off without me, like I'm just gonna leave. I can see that reaction, but I still wonder about the dog. I still wonder about her sister because there's no mention of her having that kind of falling out with her sister, and you'd probably still want someone to take care of your dog. So either she did find a way to figure these things out and they're just not brought up in the episode, or she was just, yeah, I mean, if you're hitting rock bottom, like her mom was explaining, maybe she wasn't in that state of mind, really thinking clearly, and we don't know for how long she still was in that state, or when exactly she moved to Oregon, if this was soon after she left, or maybe this was just a few years ago. So it could have been that for the first 1, 2, 3 years they were searching for her, she was still living her life similarly to before, and she was traveling a lot, like being in different places. So who knows how clearly she was thinking all this through. But yeah, it's interesting they did take so long to find her, but at the same time, I'm glad they did, assign a cold case investigator to her case, and were able to find it. Though, I mean, that's all kind of thanks to that woman that recognized that this is a missing person and
I
called them up.
think that shows you how kind of tough a job investigations like this are. I mean, this is a case where a missing woman was alive and well, just living her life in another state, and it still took 6 years just to track her down and figure out that that was what was going on. Imagine if this was someone who was taken under suspicious circumstances or murdered, or anything bad happened to her and someone was actively trying to cover it up. How long would it have taken before they figured it out, or ever figured it out? I think overall police did a good job, and they worked hard on this case, as you mentioned, assigning a cold case investigator, not letting their focus loosen on it. But I also wonder, what things could they have done more to bring a resolution more quickly? We don't know everything that they did or didn't do, obviously, but I wonder if there were, maybe if they had somehow expanded their focus, did they ever consider the possibility that she wasn't in the state anymore? When they held those media events, that gets the attention of people in South Carolina, but Oregon's on the opposite coast, very far away. And I don't know if it had crossed their mind that maybe she was not still on the East Coast. Maybe she was on the West Coast. And obviously you can't know everything, but in hindsight, it does seem like maybe there was a way to broaden that search and get some answers faster. Do you have any closing thoughts?
I'm just glad this is like a happy ending. We do have one episode where we can all be happy and maybe go hug our loved ones and hold them close. And I know you didn't. I think recalled that you hadn't seen the episode before, so I think you must have been even more happy to see her well and alive.
I teared up a little bit. It's one of those rare examples of a good positive ending. But don't worry, we will be back to the gloom and doom, I'm sure, for episode 5 of Disappeared the Abyss, and we can't wait to discuss it with you.